test.
You call them goats and sheep?
Goats and sheep, right?
Tell us who is which.
The goats are the non-believers. The sheep are the ones who go along with it. The experiment is to use ESP. Well, the goats know there's no such thing as ESP. So if I'm half and half, I have
the head of one and the other part of the other? Is that the idea?
Well, let's not get metaphysical on this now, right?
Or anatomical.
Okay, all right, I won't do it.
You find out ahead of time the believers and the non-believers, and then you give them what it's essentially a multiple choice test. Well, when you score it separately for the two groups, the believers, the sheep, tend to score above chance, just like they were told to, and the goats often score significantly below chance. Now think about it for a minute. If I had a deck of ordinary playing cards and asked you to guess red or black, we know you get 50% by chance. And even
over enough trials.
Yeah, and even without statistics, if you obviously got all 52 right, that would be extraordinary. How about if you got 0 right? That's just as extraordinary statistically.
Of course.
Okay. The goats score significantly below chance. And they feel good about it. They said, there's no such thing here. I got a lousy score on the test. That proves that I'm right. But the only way someone can score significantly below chance is to unconsciously sometimes use ESP to know what the right card is and be sure not to guess that.
Now that sounds like what we call a posteriori, means after the fact rationalization. And then if you average it all together, it comes out to chance.
But you don't average it together. You make the distinction ahead of time. That's the important difference. Now, as a psychologist, I find this fascinating. I've studied many ways in which we distort our perceptions of reality to support our belief systems, and here are people pulling off a small miracle to prove there are no such things as miracles. It's great.
Dean, do you find any common characteristics of high ESP incidence other than the sheep-goat effect?
Well, one actually that Marilyn started looking at was in the nature of creativity, because there's a high correlation among people who declare themselves to be creative and their belief in ESP. And so in telepathy tests now, the creativity has been looked at among artists and writers and dancers and musicians. And it turns out that musicians have an effect size which is something like 2 to 3 times higher than the average person.
You did a study at Juilliard?
That's right, at the Juilliard School.
What was that study, briefly?
Well, we were looking at the possibility that one person could detect images of a video clip being played in another room. So, for example, a woman...
And these were musicians, creative,
music,
talented.
dance, and drama students. Okay. All of that population scored significantly higher than the general population. Of that group of music, dance, and drama students, the musicians scored specifically better. This study was then replicated in a PhD thesis at the University of Edinburgh by Kathy Dalton. We're now preparing to do a further experiment to look at then the psychophysiological correlates. But just an example of one of the mentation reports or responses.
What does that mean, mentation?
A person in one room was watching a video clip from The Wiz, which is a parody of The Wizard of Oz. The person, not knowing at all that that was the video clip, in the other room described a hot air balloon, a black female nightclub performer, a lion, a wizard, a dog, and yellow. And what was on the video clip that was being looked at in the other room was a scene of Diana Ross as Dorothy with the Scarecrow, the wizard, the Tin Man, the lion, walking across the Brooklyn Bridge with the cityscape of New York in the background and a hot air balloon.
How many other times
that
does not occur?
Well, what we did then was to have that video clip with 3 decoys. The 4 video clips were then shown to the person in the room, and they were asked to identify which one most closely matched their imagery. They were able to do that, to give that a first-place ranking. We did this on a number of trials, experimental trials, in such a way that you could use statistics to identify how likely this response was on the basis of chance. And what you'd expect on the basis of chance, if they were just guessing, is about 1/4 of the time they would get it right. We found that 50% of the time they were able to correctly identify the target.
Charles, you've written quite a bit about altered states of consciousness. Do you find more incidents of ESP during dreamlike states?
If you look at what happens naturally out in people's ordinary experience, yes, a lot of them come from dreams or states of reverie or something like that. And then there has been experimental work at the Maimonides Medical Center in New York some years ago, where people were monitored in a laboratory for their nighttime dreams and woken up regularly, while a sender in another room tried to telepathically influence the dreams. Overall, the results were quite significant, and some of the individual results were striking. I mean, we may talk about average results being low, but occasionally you get extremely good psychic descriptions.
Barry, what is the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, or to those who love her, PsyCop? And why does it feel so good to go after these hardworking parapsychologists and make their life so hard?
I don't think it's a witch hunt at all. PsyCop is the committee that you mentioned, and it's a group of people who have expertise in a wide variety of scientific and philosophical and other academic disciplines, and it's a group of people who simply asks for the evidence and looks at it. Obviously, the other side thinks we're unfair in our criticisms. We think we're only doing our job. We're simply looking for the evidence and seeing whether it measures up by our standards.
Let's focus on healing, which is an area of your personal interest, Marilyn. What are some of the categories in which you look for transpersonal experience in healing? You see sometimes psychic healing in the voodoo jungles of people doing really miraculous things. I've read of therapeutic touch, or the hands-on, laying on of hands. Different religions have this experience, the power of prayer. What are the different categories of how paranormal phenomena might be involved in the healing process?
Well, let me match that with a comment that Barry just made about whether we are threatened or challenged by PsyCop, and I would say that the skeptical community have been very helpful in some areas. So you mentioned psychic surgery, for example. There have been cases where some of the skeptics have gone in and attempted to simulate a psychic surgeon doing surgery without any kind of instruments. They separate the skin, they pull out some kind of organ, there's blood. And you can see that frequently these psychic surgeons are using some kind of false thumb with blood and tissue of oftentimes an animal. So they're using some kind of heavy ritual. And that in and of itself is not wrong, because the shaman or the psychic surgeon realizes that they're trying to harness the patient's own belief system. And this is a way of kind of dramatically utilizing that.
But there's nothing psychic involved in that.
Well, I can't say in all cases, but I can say that there are some real good examples where this is a case of, I hate to use the term fraud because that implies a certain intention, but certainly not a paranormal explanation. On the other hand, when we come into the laboratory and we look at some cases where, for example, the effect of distant prayer, intercessory prayer, on patient populations, there's been a very nice study of coronary care patients where two groups of people, all of them getting conventional medical intervention. One group gets prayed for at a distance, one doesn't. The group that gets prayed for at a distance has far better medical outcomes, statistically meaningful medical outcomes relative to the control group.
Pardon my naivete, but how do you direct your prayer to this group versus that group?
Well, it's one of the challenges, and exactly what do we mean by prayer, and what do you do about the fact that some people are being prayed for by their family as well as, and what if they're in the control group? There does seem to be something about being able to focus the intention of the experiment, that at any rate, the experimental results seem to be supportive.
What do you tell the people? You say, pray for the people in room 302, but not 308?
Well, they're not told anything about the second group, the control group. Another project that's just been completed is working with patients who have advanced AIDS. Again, you parse them apart into two groups. Everybody knows they're participating in a study that involves distant prayer, but they don't know which group they've been randomized into. And again, the medical outcomes for the prayed for group are statistically better than the group that haven't been prayed for.
This is remarkable. Why haven't I read this on the front page of the New York Times?
Oh, it's been in the New York Times. It's been in Time Magazine, front page of Time Magazine, cover story. It has been in a variety of different forums.
Jim, you look amused by this.
No, it has in fact been in the media, yes.
And what do you think of it?
Well, when I look at something like that, I have a long experience of hearing these things described, and when they're described, they always sound like this. And then when you start getting under the hood, the devil is always in the details. And I haven't gotten under the hood on these particular ones. When I do get under the hood, when I have gotten under the hood in the past, you get down there and you find that there are subtleties in the way the experiment is designed or in the statistical analysis that make it much less powerful than you might think from the headline.
Dean, there's a whole other area of psychic interest, and that is in military intelligence. There was a period of time where the CIA was very involved in this type of research. Can you tell us about that?
Well, up until 1995 it couldn't, but it all became declassified in 1995. And yes, there's about a 20-year history of